D'accord, bon, c'est bon. Donc, est-ce que c'était la première fois que vous vous entreteniez pour un ouvrage?
Was it the first time you were accepting interviews for a book?
I don't remember. All I remember about the first interview I ever gave was a student, and we talked for about 2 hours, totally exhausted, and then he'd forgotten to turn his machine on.
That's what I was sure.
I remember that, yes. I can't remember anything else about it. Yeah. It was a long time ago.
Avec David, vous avez travaillé comment? Ça a été long?
How did we work together? Was it very long, a long process?
Well, the interviews lasted 100 hours, I think, didn't they, collectively?
Yeah.
It was a long time, but it was split up over, quite some period. And David would ask me, questions about a play, and I try and answer them, but I think his questions were very good. I call them forensic. They're very sort of very precise, and they made me answer very, very accurately rather than in sort of generalizations. So I think it worked very well. And I think I learned more about my plays than he did, because he made me answer areas that I just assumed they were there, and so on. And so vaguely I would know what they were about, but it was very, very useful to be asked to explain why something was there and what its purpose was. And it's very useful because when a play is being staged or rehearsed, of course those are the questions that actors and directors and audiences ask. And oddly enough, sometimes when you're writing, you don't have to really specifically ask those questions. So I think it was very, very fruitful, and I'm sure in the future students will be discovering and discussing and arguing about the influence of David Tuaillon on my work.
C'est vrai.
That's post Tuaillon.
Oui, parce que vous dites...
But it was a very... I make light of it in a way, but I was obliged to really try to go down to the foundations of what I think and what my work is doing. Yeah.
C'est ce que vous demandez aux spectateurs, de toute façon, c'est de se poser les questions fondamentales.
This is what you expect from the audience, from audiences, to ask these basic questions.
Well, that's a very, very complicated relationship between an author and an audience, and the intermediary of the actor, and it is very, very complicated. I suppose I want the audience to ask themselves various questions, of course, but it can't be reduced to somebody. It's like if you look at the face of your child. And I suppose, questions could be involved in that, and of course they could. it's a question of what the audience knows. And really, I suppose what I would like to happen is that the audience would ask themselves questions. You know, the play would work in such a way that it made the audience ask questions. I think the purpose of a play, or certainly of a modern drama, is to take the audience to a situation where the audience have to define who they are as a person. This is me. I think Artaud says some or the other about the dramatist or the actor, I don't know, this is being in a fire and signalling to the audience or something like that. And says something like that. But I would say really that wasn't the work of the author. That's the work of the audience itself, if you see what I mean. You know, the audience are obviously the most important, or the reader is the most important person in a theatre.
Vous posez une question dans l'épilogue qui résume, à mon sens, finalement, le livre que j'ai lu, qui est « Qui es-tu sur ce site dont tu es responsable ?»
Vous voulez qu'il commente là-dessus?
Je voulais savoir si, à son âge, après son parcours, lui, il avait répondu à cette question ou s'il n'en était pas question, justement.
So, at the end of the book, in the epilogue, we all reassuming everything we said in a single question that you make, that is, you have to define who are you on this site that you are responsible for. And Paméla asks whether, after your experience as a dramatist of 50 years of playwriting, have you answered this question, or do you think you shouldn't answer this question?
That's difficult.
I think I think you have to discover yourself when you're writing a play. But over time, I think you know what I think you know what matters to you and what doesn't. I have an image which is a mixture of Rousseau and Dostoevsky. But look, there is one person, a child or an elderly person on it. Yeah, usually somebody who's vulnerable, let's say a child or an elderly person, and they are there and they are suffering. And over there is the universe and everybody else, and God and everybody. And you save the child and you destroy the universe. Absolutely. Because morality could have no other meaning. And of course, that's a bit unfair, because if you go to the universe, you would find it was full of suffering children or suffering old people. But the device of drama is to present it in such a way that you would know that person, that child, that woman, that soldier, the woman standing on a railway station, a soldier sitting down in a battlefield or whatever, that is the most important thing. Yeah. And Dostoevsky says something like, if there is one suffering child in the world, there can't be a God. And of course, well, there can't be a God anyway, but certainly not. But it is that's the peculiarity of drama, that it can use reality in that way. The law, the government, social services, universities, everything. They all have to generalize. You know, they have to. It's the difference between law and justice. The law is never just, because it must always compromise and whatever, and you could then say, yeah, but that's what cities of society should be about. But they can only function if there is something called justice, and justice is only created in theatre, nowhere else, really. So that's the function of drama, and that's really what it does to the audience. It puts the audience in that situation where they have to make this decision or disagree with this decision, and if they disagree with it, then they have to know what it costs them.
Et effectivement, vous insistez beaucoup sur l'impératif humain, et si j'ai bien compris, sur la responsabilité morale individuelle qui nous engage dans le monde, qui se détache du théâtre, comme vous dites, engagé de gauche habituel, qui voudrait moraliser et dire ce qui est juste ou bien, pour aller, à mon sens, dans un beaucoup plus vaste ensemble. Est-ce que, et je ne sais pas si je suis claire,
si, il faut qu'on se souvienne,
voilà, est-ce que cet impératif assez ferme, parfois violent, pour reprendre un terme qu'on emploie beaucoup, vous semble avoir été entendu au fil des âges, par votre, en tout cas par le milieu, ou en tout cas théâtre, l'audience.
Ouais, d'accord. So it's about the human imperative you're insisting on at length at the end of the book. The question is about this, how it is articulated with the individual moral responsibility you define in the book. And the question is about, do you think that after your 50 years of writing for theatre, this human imperative has been heard from audiences and from theatre workers?
Yes and no.
Yeah. Yes with a but and no with an if.
Well, I mean, there are two parts to that question really. What drama is about? It's curious because you think of imagination as being also rather sort of fanciful and arbitrary and a sort of game almost, you know.
Imagination. Oui. On pense que c'est de la fantaisie, etc. Un jeu.
Yeah, but I am sure, I'm absolutely sure that human morality and human logic and all the things that define humanness come from the imagination. And so you have to try to get something called human logic, so that it's just not arbitrary, it's not a feeling or whatever. And so that's an intricate thing. And I think we've tried to, which I can't explain now, you know, that's too much. But I think it's very, very important, and I think it's a lack of understanding about that makes societies barbarous. So, and that I think is what we tried to explore in the book. And of course, that's what I tried to do on the stage. I think there's a great deal of intellectual philosophy that goes into that, but I think it's like human thought has philosophy and drama. It doesn't have science and rationality or something. They're very important, but they're programmed by the universe. And philosophy is an art, and nor is drama or art. They're created. And what happens in human history is you get periods of drama, then periods of philosophy. So drama almost asks the impossible, and then philosophy tries to understand it and sort it out. And philosophy inevitably gets more and more and more confused. And so then you have to have a new period of drama. And then drama will push the human situation to an extreme and make demands on civilization and on its audience. And the philosophers will then come in and, you know, it's like, the obvious example is the Greek dramatists and then Plato and Aristotle and all the rest of it. And they tend not to like the dramatist, or they tend to misunderstand the dramatist. No, so we're living in a period now where philosophy has got very confused. French philosophy has got very confused. So we've reached a stage where philosophers can no longer think. And that's always a disadvantage in philosophy. And so we have to create a new drama. And if we don't create a new drama, then what will happen is that the program of the universe, that science and rationality, will take over. And we say we are the rational species. Reason does not love us. It's indifferent to us. So if well, not that idea. If we are human because we can reason, then we are in a love affair that will never be consummated. And so we need something else that will enable us to make human use of the powers of thought. And that creates civilization, culture, and all those things. And we create our humanness. And it's something we have to do every day, we have to do in the future. If you went back to the past, the trouble with God is he's an amateur. And doesn't understand people, you know. So we have to create those situations where we define and make our humanness. So when I go into the theatre, they start talking about aesthetics and art and things like that. And all those things, they can become very, very dangerous, because they can become answers when the questions have changed. You know, so somebody produces. We've been looking at Delacroix pictures this morning, and you know, they're fascinating. You know, you can see he's painting about biblical events and all the rest of it, but he's painting about the French Revolution and about the coming of the trains. You know, one of Manet's greatest pictures is somebody waiting in the railway station and steam coming and things like that. At the moment in the theatre, when you enter into the theatre, you go into the past, and that's not good. So we have to find a theatre that can be modern and that can talk to the society we are living in. And in the book we try to follow up that problem, because I think the book, the reason or the occasion for the book is it's about my plays, but it isn't really. It's about drama itself, and that's because I've lived in a time when drama has to recreate itself, and it's interesting. People say to me sometimes, if you read the very first play that you wrote, it's like the whole problem of all the plays that you've written are in that first play, and I think this is absolutely true. And but what I've done is pursue those problems through a very rapidly changing, incredibly rapidly changing world, and so I think what I learned from the book is I see it as a textbook on drama itself, and how drama can be used in such a way that the audience are presented with their situation rather than allowed to escape from it in entertainment, and rather than confusing an audience by trying to impose the past on them. And it is...
Impose the past.
Que le passé s'impose.
Yeah, and it is, you said earlier on something about sort of simplicity, and the great advantage, the great importance of theatre is that it can take all those huge subjects that philosophers, quite rightly, write huge books about and think about deeply, that scientists think about, and psychologists think about, and it can, with full responsibility and not false simplification, but with a greater urgency, because you can always close the book, but when you're being confronted by something on the stage, you can't close the book, and the most you can do is close yourself. And if you do that, then you still carry that text with you away. So and its great social function is, what drama can do is simplify the most complex questions in the world. And I was talking to an actor yesterday, and what's the character living for? What's the character dying for? And so on. And there was a little sentence, and there was a full stop, and then the text said R-A-H, and a full stop. And if the actor had said to me, what's the meaning of reality at that moment, I would have said it is in R. It's just R. Human beings are not going to stand on the edge of the cliff and say to be or not to be, or something, but they will say because they're totally in that situation. But of course you've got to get them on the edge of the cliff first before you can say So, but that's the business of drama, to put the utmost meaning into simple situations. You can combine the situation with with language, and it's the combination of the two things that works in theatre, I think. But it always has to be guaranteed by the actor. That's the important thing, because you're not reading a book, you're looking at a human face or hearing a human voice. And those things are finally impenetrable, because if somebody asked you to explore a map of the universe, you could do it. You know, you'd need a lot of machines and microscopes and God knows what, all the spaceships, and you know, you could travel throughout the universe, but it would be much more difficult to explore a human face.
C'est vrai. Je réfléchis en même temps que vous parlez.
Edward, I resent you very much.
Hmm?
I resent you very much. Because you just said God is an amateur and we live a love story that never be consumed. If you had said that for the book, we would have titles.
But you have a
The
lot.
book could have been called God is an amateur.
Il y a des phrases déjà dans ce livre exceptionnelles.
She said there are phrases very punchy in the book.
Well, why
Qui prennent
can't
en otage en fait.
why cannibals eat? I mean this very, very seriously. And you know, this is the complications of religion. Why cannibals eat human beings is they eat the human face because that's the closest they can possibly get to looking at it. They turn it into themselves. But I think drama is probably a more convenient form of contact with cannibalism. And but if that's the way things were organised, then we would certainly have philosophical books about cannibalism, which were the cordon bleu of cannibalism, and that would turn it into art.
Vous parlez alors dans l'introduction de la pièce Lire, si je me souviens bien, vous avez tout donc vous entamez sur la violence et vous expliquez en faisant des similitudes avec le règne animal que nous sommes violents parce que nous ne pouvons pas vivre dans les contraintes que la société nous donne, point. On ne peut pas vivre dans les grands ensembles, etc. Donc vous expliquez, j'écris sur la violence, il faudrait être fou pour ne pas le faire, et c'est très, 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 très facile à comprendre et à entendre. Et puis, à l'intérieur, vous demandez l'innocence, enfin, il y a cette notion d'innocence, je vous laisserai simplifier après. Vous dites qu'il est plus facile de vivre dans une société corrompue parce qu'on ne sait pas comment s'y prendre avec l'innocence. Ce qui m'intéressait de savoir, c'est cette innocence dans cette violence, c'est ça l'espoir très fort qui vous permet de dire que vous ne désespérez pas malgré ces constats.
Okay, so Paméla is referring not only to the book but also to the introduction to Lear, in which you talk about violence and you develop the fact that we are not naturally violent, but we are made violent by the conditions society makes for us. And you say in the book and you oppose to that innocence. And the question is about, is this innocence in the middle of all this violence, is the hope that can lead you to say... Qu'est-ce que c'était la formule à la fin?
Que vous ne désespérez pas,
yes.
Shakespeare non plus ne désespérait pas.
And the fact that innocence remain in such a violent context is a reason for hope for you and as it is for Shakespeare. When you say Shakespeare never despair, the one thing Shakespeare never does is despair.
Obviously, we're capable of violence. You know, it's cliche, but what I want to say is that society uses violence. You know, it has a structural use for it, and internationally it uses violence in wars. And it's no use saying, oh well, let's banish war tomorrow, let's all be pacifists and so on. You know, that's like saying, well, let's stop rain being wet. It's impossible. It can't happen like that. So you have to find out why societies use violence. But I think that there's a paradox in this, because this is where I think Rousseau says something that's very, very wrong and had enormous political consequences. He said that everybody is born free. They're not. We're born in chains. And if you are born free, then you are going to justify whatever means are necessary to recapture the freedom that's been stolen from you. And that's a form of politics. But it seems to me that that's not true. We're born in chains, and the chains are the human responsibility we have for the universe, and for other human beings. And this is the process of the child growing up and becoming an adult person living in society. That's quite paradoxical, because but I can't follow that up. No, that's too paradoxical. I won't go down that thought at the moment. So what I want to say is that we are born in chains because we are responsible for what it means to be a human being. And that is a form of innocence. But to live in society, you become corrupt because you have to live according to law, because that's the best that human beings have been able to produce after millions of years of history. They're still working at that problem. But what I think you can do in drama is produce those situations which are situations where radical innocence can declare itself. And if I said earlier on that there would be one person suffering there, one victim of being alive, and over there was the universe, yeah. Well, the strange thing about radical innocence is that that person in that situation would say, destroy me so that can live. It would turn the whole thing around. And that's Hamlet, that's Antigone, that's Hecuba. They are. I sometimes amuse audience by saying, Antigone says to Creon, I will not do this, and so I will go and die. I will walk to my tomb. And she gets halfway there and she says, oh no, I've changed my mind. I'll come back. But she can't do that because she's innocent. No, she's just innocent. And Creon is saying you have committed a crime, and her crime is innocence. And the most difficult thing to understand in the world is innocence, and people don't like innocence. They want you to be corrupt. They want to know what your price is, what they can, how they can buy you. And what I try to do in my plays is create those situations where innocence appears on the stage, and then the audience are confronted with their own innocence, and that can be a very, very, very big responsibility for them. It's either totally liberating, or sometimes they jump up and run out of the theatre and shout and say it's a disgrace or whatever, but they take their chains with them.
Oui, je suis vraiment tout à fait d'accord.
She perfectly agrees. She agrees.
Et ce qui m'a paru très beau et très touchant dans ce que j'ai lu de vos pièces et dans ce livre, c'est que justement une deuxième prison du monde actuel, c'est le cynisme en fait, et c'est le fait de ne pas, même pas laisser maintenant les purs ou les innocents s'exprimer, toujours en détournant leur langage comme quelque chose de basique, d'acquis. Je ne sais pas si je me fais bien comprendre. C'est-à-dire dire aujourd'hui non, je ne veux pas vivre dans cette société, apparaît extraordinairement galvaudé, très naïf, et on est vraiment taxé de fou. Et dans la possibilité, alors c'est pas vraiment une question, c'est plus une constatation et je ne sais pas, un hommage que je lui rends. On comprend dans le langage vrai et pur que vous arrivez à mettre en place, qui mélange des choses très lyriques avec justement ces O, ces A, ces phrases coupées au milieu, très simples, qui redisent, qui redonnent cette innocence à faire revibrer cette innocence, voilà. Au cœur de celui qui le lit, et j'imagine qu'il le voit. J'ai pas encore vu la pièce, mais voilà. Et déjà de ça je voulais le féliciter et le remercier.
So it's more a comment, a statement she wants to make. She wants to make than a true question. The point is that she thinks that nowadays there's over chains given to people, and these chains are cynicism, so that no one, however innocent he can be, can say no, I don't want to live in that society, I want to resist, because this sort of language have corrupted that, so that we can't even say this sort of statements anymore. And that what she likes very much and admire in your plays, in that you provide a language that could allow these sorts of innocent statements to be said, to be claimed.
Well,
thank you.
There are two things really I want to say about that. One is, I think the book is a program for drama. I mean, it's not laying down exercises for writers or actors. I don't mean it's a program in that way. But I think it's a program in that it says this is the we urgently need a new drama. This is why we need it. This is the problem. So it is a program for a future drama. Yeah, well, I think the work. I think the book works very well in that sense. The other thing I want to say is, yes, cynicism, boredom, anger, all these things are in a way symptoms, because I think human subjectivity, that's what we sense and feel and think about and so on, is being erased in our society. And we're not aware of this because we think it's the opposite. If you go back 50 years or whatever to Franz Kafka is really saying human beings are alienated. And Marx is saying human beings are alienated. What we think now in modern society, we are all integrated. We're integrated into the market, and if there are some people who are not integrated into the market is either their fault or else they don't know how to integrate themselves into the market. So the solution to alienation is to get more money. And then you become a full member of, a paid up member, a voting member of the market. So democracy is being changed into the market, and this is what I call the parasite. It's as if the human problem has been taken over by a parasite, and what happens with the parasite is it slowly devours its host, and you start living for the parasite, you know. And I think that's the problem. That's in a way it's the most serious problem that we have. I mean, there were economic, you know, we're destroying the earth, and the bankers have now turned into naked criminals. They're criminals, you know. It's a mafia, and you know, there's no other way of explaining it. It's sheer criminality. And yet they're supposed to be the engine of society, you know, keeping society running and producing the market. It's an absurd, dangerous situation. If we are going to recover our subjectivity and our responsibility for the world we're living in, then that's why we have to have this new drama, because human beings are the dramatic species, and we have to dramatize our situation. And if we don't dramatize our situation by accepting responsibility for ourselves in that situation, then the situation will dramatize itself, and that will be very, very, very destructive. And that's more than 20 minutes. So I think we can stop there. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Merci beaucoup, j'aurais pu continuer sur beaucoup de choses parce
She
que
has many questions.
Bah,
more.
merci.
Well, I've got many questions too, so you know.
On va
Good. Well, your questions were very good, so you needn't have been so anxious.